And welcome back, students, once more to our last lesson, this time in file management. We have one last topic to discuss, and that is of cloud and cloud storage. So before we kind of jump into things, we really need to define what the cloud is. And we've kind of talked about it a little bit in some of our previous things, but we haven't really defined what the cloud is. Well, cloud computing, or simply just the cloud, is an expression used to describe a variety of computing concepts that involve typically large numbers of computers connected in real time over the internet. Now, often the phrase common refers to network services that appear to be provided by real hardware, but are actually virtual. Remember, in our previous lesson, we talked about virtualization. So a lot of what's going on here is virtualized hardware. You don't actually connect to a physical PC. You're connecting to a virtualized environment that over the internet, a web service. The term also comes from the ability to scale up and down on the fly, the need for the hardware without affecting the end user as much as cloud can easily go up and down without affecting us daily. What this refers to is, like, for example, if I have a cloud service and let's say I have only, 10 gigs of storage, but I need 15, well, I just pay for the 15 gig storage and instantly I have access for the additional storage. Now, let's really quickly just discuss the origins of the cloud. Well, the cloud concept actually started all the way back in the 1950s when mainframe computers can be accessed directly. Remember, we kind of talked about this a little bit when we discussed the history of the internet. Now, in order to optimize costs, there was a practice developed that allowed multiple users to share terminals in a concept which was known as time sharing. If you recall, we used that terminology back then too. Again, it's coming back here. So the concept was known as time sharing, and it's very much related to that of how the cloud was developed. Now, the name of the cloud, interestingly enough, seemed to appear about the same time as the early internet, as a cloud was usually used to depict the internet. Nowadays, you'll see like icons, they'll show like a globe, or maybe some kind of icon like that with like interconnected lines. But in the early days, it was a cloud. Now, cloud benefits and characteristics. We'll start off by naming a couple of the positive things that come out of the cloud before we go and talk about a couple of negative things. One of the first things to talk about is that of APIs, or application programming interfaces. These are things that provide immediate access to typically a broad range of resources and applications that are hosted within the infrastructure of whatever you're using. So, for example, if you look at Facebook, Facebook has a bunch of apps. Well, in order for those apps to work inside Facebook, they have to use Facebook's API. And once they use that API, then they can function within the rules that Facebook allows them to. But those sorts of things follow this application programming interface. So there's a range of resources and things that they can access that they can then implement into their application. Now, another benefit is that of cost. All right, due to physical hardware being done by a service provider, hardware costs are offloaded from the user, and you only have to pay for what you use. All right, you don't have to go, if you want, like say, on a server, you can just go buy a web service. Like there's, like for example, Amazon Web Services. You can go buy a web server. You can go out and you don't have to build a web server. You can just buy domain hosting. Boom, done. I'm done. All I do, I upload my files. I'm good to go. Life is golden. And because it's only paid for what you use, think about it this way. If you're using, let's say, like Google Drive or OneDrive or something like that, one of these cloud storage mediums, typically, if you're using it, you have a cap of so many gigs. And after you hit that cap, if you want more, you have to pay for that additional cap. Now, another benefit of the cloud is that it's not device and location dependent. It's independent. This means you're not tied to a physical location. You can access resources offsite as well as inside. Think about using Google. If you want to work in school and you start on, let's say, paper, and you go and you work in Google Docs, you type it up, but you don't finish in time. You're like, well, I'm going to go home tonight. I'm going to finish up the paper. So you go home that night, you finish up the paper. Now, you didn't have to carry a flash drive or anything like that. You just simply sign back into the cloud through Google and access your file. It wasn't tied to you having to come back up to school to work on it. You could go home and work on it. That's what it means for it to be device and location independent. Additionally, there's a certain level of reliability that comes with the cloud. So your maintenance and uptime is taken care of the service provider. You don't have to worry about fixing something. It falls onto whoever's hosting it. Additionally, storage maintenance costs are also offloaded to the responsibility of the service provider. So when it comes time to update their hardware, you're not the one doing it. They have to. Scalability, I've kind of already alluded to this, but makes it very easy to add more storage or processing power on the fly. So let's say you need, like I said, I need 5 more gigs of storage. Guess what? I purchased it, boom, instantly I got that. All right, and there's not a need also to purchase additional hardware, just the virtualized allotment. When I go and purchase that 5 gigs, I didn't have to go and pay for them to buy 5 more gigs of storage. They already had the 5 gigs of storage because it's virtualized. They just simply turn on. It's like, hey, they paid for 5 more gigs. Let's allocate 5 more gigs for them. Also, security is a big improvement because typically physical and cybersecurity falls under the responsibility of the service provider. You don't have to be the one to worry about maintaining the security and safety of your data because you put a certain level of trust within the service provider that they're going to take care of your information because you're using their service. And of course, virtualization, which we've already talked about. This is no physical hardware is required in order to provide services. Like I don't have to plug in a USB stick or a CD drive or anything like that. Don't have to do any of that. I simply just fire it. Like typically, fire up your web browser, you go to whatever portal it is, you log in, and instantly you have access to those services. Now, that's enough for benefits. Let's start talking about a couple of drawbacks or dangers of the cloud. Because obviously, things like identity theft are a very real danger out there. So one of the first things to discuss, of course, is that of privacy and abuse. So a lot of times when you start using information on the cloud, if you're signed in, for example, you're collecting web surfing habits or building cookies and stuff like that. Well, as you start doing this information is then typically often sold to advertisers. Right? You're building a digital profile of your search habits. You're building a digital profile of your buying habits. And a lot of times that information is sold off to other people. The better question though to ask is, okay, my information is being sold out, but how do you know that that information is being sold or used without your permission? It's hard to know that because a lot of times you don't necessarily have control over that aspect. Sometimes you do, with certain applications will let you have certain level of control. But a lot of times they will use the information kind of how they want. And so personal information about you could be easily leaked out. Additionally, you look at things such as social media. Information that you post on there is, if you have your settings set, say, the public, people are going to be able to find anything they want about you. So there is a certain loss to privacy. Additionally, we start talking about accessibility. That means that the performance is typically lower than something that's located on your computer. All right, you're not going to have the same level of performance over a web browser than you will if you were able to use the physical components of your computer. And the reason for that is that, for example, let's say you're playing a video game. Well, yes, you might be able to play it in the web browser, but no web browser game without downloading files is going to match the same capability of a game that can utilize local GPU hardware. It's never going to happen. Also, compliance. Right? Are you sure that that service provider for the cloud is following all the necessary laws and regulations? Are they being followed? Whether it's HIPAA or HIPAA or anything else that you're involved in. You would hope that those service providers are following the laws and regulations to the greatest extent. And if they aren't, what action will be necessary if the laws are not followed? Is it just the company's going to drag in? Are you going to be pulled into whatever legal fight because you have information with that company? Because maybe they sold off your services or something like that. So there's a lot of things that can be intertwined into things here. Additionally, there comes down to the question of legality, or who actually owns the information you're putting out there in the cloud. Do you or does the company own it? There's been a lot of back and forth about, you put something up on Facebook, for example, or you put it up on Twitter. You don't actually own it. You put it up there, you're posting it, and then they have the right to lease and sell out those kind of information. There is some back and forth about this. Some people say, no, you still retain the ultimate rights to those images. A lot of companies say, well, you put it on our servers, now it's ours. So there is some back and forth about the legality of that. Additionally, remember I mentioned security is a plus side. Well, it can also be a downside as well. Because typically people aren't just using like one cloud app. You're not just using Google Drive. You're using multiple apps. All right. So obviously as you use more and more cloud-based apps, or cloud interface things, whether it's on banking, storage, Netflix, whatever. As your data gets spread out in multiple copies everywhere, name, address, email, whatever, it increases what is known as the attack surface area, or the more areas where data can be compromised, because the more places you exist, or the more places potentially that a hacker or an attacker could mine that information and use it to try and get to other places. Also, supplier stability. Will the company hosting your stuff always be around? This has happened before. For example, there was a very famous case with the company known as Mega Upload. People had a bunch of things like family videos, family photos that were up on there. Well, Mega Upload was also known for had some pirated stuff on there. Well, what happened is their servers got seized and shut down, and the people that had the stuff on there had no notification that was going to happen, and so they had no way of getting to all the stuff they had put up there on Mega Upload. So it's something you have to consider if you're putting information up into the cloud. And lastly, or one of the last points, is sustainability for the environment. All right, cloud storage requires vast amounts of servers and computing power. It's not cheap to run a bunch of servers 24/7. It requires a huge amount of electricity, and yes, even though they can do things to help reduce the amount of electricity that's being used through various different means, it still requires a pretty constant power draw to be running these things constantly. All right, but that's enough about the pros and cons. Hopefully I haven't scared you too much, because now we need to discuss really quickly that of cloud storage. Cloud storage is a network storage that stores data in large virtualized pools. Now, information is typically held on servers by hosting companies who then sell these storage capacity to consumers, think Google Drive. Now, the safety of data obviously depends on the host company and the application which you're using, which we just talked about as one of the pros and cons that happens with cloud. All right, really quickly, let's just discuss some differences from physical architecture. In the cloud, files and folders behave under a certain set of guidelines. Those guidelines typically that they have many distributed resources, but act as a single unit. So a lot of times you'll see things, for example, like Google, for example. You're not accessing a single Google server. It's typically multiple servers that are working together, but they're acting as a single unit. So that way, if one server goes down, your data automatically jumps to the backup server for redundancy purposes, which leads right to our second point here. High fault tolerance to redundancy and distribution of data helps to prevent loss, because the last thing you want to do is to lose your access. Additionally, cloud storage is, in comparison to physical architecture, highly durable with the creation of version copies. This is really handy, especially if you have something that saves automatically. What it'll do is it will create pretty much periodic saves of things. And so if one of your most recent saves is non-accessible, it will go to the previous save, and when you log back into the application, it will be able to pull that previous information. Additionally, it operates under the official consistency clause, pretty much says that all data replicas, meaning all copies, will receive the last version if no changes are made. So that's why, like, if you look at, let's say, if you could look at the version history of a file you're working in Google Docs, pretty much what will happen, it will keep a most recent copy up until, like, you exile the application, and then let's say it made new copies. Let's say every minute it saved a copy of your file, and you were logged in for 60 minutes. Well, that means you'd have like 60 backup copies. At the end of your session, when you close out, it goes ahead and says, okay, this is the most recent copy. The rest of these, I don't really need to worry about. Maybe I'll keep one or two, but otherwise, I can get rid of the rest of these copies and free up some space. All right, and that's going to wrap up. Thanks for today, folks. So until the next time.